All right, Liz Hanna and Josh Singer, screenwriters of The Post. Let me start with you, Liz, because this story began with you as a spec script. What about this story about the Pentagon Papers being published by the Washington Post appealed to you?
Well, the story always jumped out at me first and foremost as a story about Kay finding her voice, and about a woman in a position that she has never been told that she's supposed to stand on her own 2 feet and is suddenly forced to be in a boardroom filled with men and dictate what's supposed to happen. And I think that as the backdrop of this defining moment for the paper, for her, for Ben, and for the country of publishing these papers, being able to explore it through the lens of her was really what was exciting to me.
Tell us a little bit about Kay Graham.
So Kay was the publisher of the Washington Post, owned by, she was also the owner of it, and it was formerly owned by her father. Her father had run it and then had left it to her husband, and her husband had passed away at our time in the story, I think 6 years earlier. And she had very quickly hired Ben Bradlee to come in and take it over. They'd known each other for a long time. He'd worked at Newsweek, and they're sort of teaming up. Their little relationship was going well, but they were still only the second best paper in Washington. And so at the time we meet Kay, she is sort of struggling to keep the company solvent. She was really thinking she was just warming the seat before her kids showed up to take it over. And they are about to go public.
Josh, you've written about journalism before, notably in Spotlight, which was just a couple years ago. What was exciting and new about this script that made you want to come in and do a polish on it?
Let's just start with the script. I mean, I think Liz wrote the best spec script I've ever read. I will admit I had a little bit of trepidation about going back to the journalism well. But I read Liz's script and I was just frankly blown away by the story and the way that she had managed to tell this very important story of the Fourth Estate through this very personal lens of Kay Graham. I thought that was just brilliant, frankly. And the thing for me was, Spotlight is a reporter story. It's about hunting down the story, breaking the story, about getting it right. When are we going to put this out there? We got to get it right before we put this out there. You see the publisher of the Boston Globe for, I think it's one scene in the movie, so it's all of like 2 minutes. And even Marty Baron, who's the editor of the Globe at the time, played by Liev Schreiber brilliantly, I think he's only on screen for like 20 minutes. I mean, it's very much about the reporters and about hunting down the story. Whereas this movie is all about the publisher and the editor-in-chief making a decision, not about when to put out a story, but whether to put out a story, right? It is a much more about this business decision, and the business of the newspapers, and it's much more of a character story than it is a procedural. And frankly, the opportunity to explore that decision and the opportunity to spend time with Kay and Ben, who are both such wonderful characters, really dig into Spotlight is not very much a character study as it is, again, the study of a team, right? And this is a study of a team too, but you really get to dig into who Ben and Kay are. And so frankly, again, I read Liz's script and I was, just pretty excited to jump in, not to mention the urgency, I think, of this particular story at this particular time. And then, frankly, who wouldn't want to work with, Liz Hanna and Steven Spielberg and Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, and it's
wasn't a tough day at the office.
Exactly. Exactly.
You mentioned Ben Bradlee. Talk a bit about Ben Bradlee, who he was, and his role in this story.
I mean, to me, one of the things I find fascinating about Ben, and Kay, is how close they were to power. I mean, Ben, something that I didn't know before I read Liz's script, and then subsequently read A Good Life, Ben's biography, was how close he was to JFK. And in fact, some thought that his, dogged pursuit of the Pentagon Papers and desire to put them out there was in some ways trying to, assuage a little bit of guilt over not holding Kennedy accountable enough, because he had been too close to him back when Kennedy had been in office and had missed a couple things, and so, frankly, that I found, I think we both found really fascinating. And Kay, similarly, Phil Graham, was the one who put LBJ on the ticket with Kennedy. And so,
and Robert McNamara put everybody on her board. He was one of her, if not her most trusted confidants. And so I think for us, the dynamic of not just Kay and Ben, but then these people that they had kind of on their shoulders, and their ghosts that they were living with, was really kind of an interesting world to explore.
Yeah, and this is a real evolution, right? Because I think 10 years prior, Kay or Phil gets this call and probably calls up Kennedy or calls up Johnson and says, "What do you think? Should we publish?" Whereas here there is a real separation, and this decision, I think, marks a real separation from the White House, where they really are going to choose to be a true opposition press and hold the presidency accountable. I mean, it's what Rumsfeld actually had said to Nixon, said, what you read out of all this gobbledygook that is the Pentagon Papers, what the normal layperson will read is the president is fallible. The president makes mistakes. The president lies, right? And we don't want that. That's why Nixon fought this so hard, even though there was nothing that said anything bad about him in the papers themselves. They were all about Kennedy and Johnson, and they were all historic. And I think this was the moment really when, the press, truly starts holding the presidency accountable in a different way.
And it's the facade started to crack, and they saw the opportunity, I think, to do their job in the way that hadn't necessarily been happening, which is, we're going to hold the mirror up to you and we're going to show you what it looks like.
And frankly, getting to see this team of Ben and Kay as they evolve, right, and become the team that will then, be the backbone behind the Watergate reporting, right, in a way that hasn't, most people don't know how involved Kay was in all those decisions to publish, because, that movie about the Watergate reporting, doesn't feature Kay Graham.
It's a little movie, little known movie.
Yeah, we try not to speak its name. It's like Voldemort.
It'll curse
right?
us.
Exactly. But so frankly, this is an origin story and a great one.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you speaking of the press holding the presidency accountable, it's something that has been talked about a lot today. Liz, I mean, when you first started writing this, I don't know how long ago you started writing this script, but I mean, was all this fake news stuff going on as you were originally writing it, or?
I was writing it in summer 2016, and Amy bought the spec of the script about 8 days before the election. So we were living in sort of a very reality, or kind of expected reality at that time. So fake news was kind of a term that was out there, but was not the sort of antagonistic relationship with the press and the flat out sort of disbelief of their credibility that they've spent years and years, and these institutions have credibility for a reason. That did not exist, and that was sort of unfolding throughout the process of making the movie. And so I think that has been for all of us, was a very kind of strange thing to be happening while we were in production, making a film about the First Amendment, about the responsibility of the press, about why the division happens, why that line exists, and sort of seeing every day that being questioned.
When you were doing the rewrites, I mean, did you look at it and say, oh, this is an opportunity to talk about what's going on today in this moment? Or, I mean, were there things that jumped out to you that you said, oh, we can tie this into today?
I think it's, again, the history is the history, right? Yeah. But it is amazing how things repeat. And one of the things that jumped out to us was we started, Steven had pulled up this Nixon tape of, Nixon talking about the Post. And that led us to go back to look at, all the Nixon tapes of Nixon reacting. And very quickly, we were struck by how similar he sounds to the guy currently in office.
Yeah.
And very quickly we were like, maybe this should be in the film.
Yeah.
This is the real antagonist, which is why, Richard Nixon is in the film.
Yeah.
As Steven was joking last night, he's got his first choice in casting there. But and so we literally use those tapes. It's Nixon's voice, because we feel like, again, it's not us coloring. This is what he said. This is how he reacted. I think this is, it sounds maybe he's a little brighter than the Karen occupant of the office, but he sounds very much like the Karen occupant of the office in terms of the vindictive nature, in terms of the attacks on the press, in terms of the paranoia, and frankly, what better way to hold a lens up to what's happening today than to literally go verbatim to the history.
Well, and I don't think, and also about, to your question, we never changed things, or in rewrites, we're looking at opportunities that were happening in real life. We really felt history is cyclical, the pendulum swings, and we're telling a true story. It's our responsibility as filmmakers to tell the true story of what happened. And so I think we very much actually did not want to actively make any comparisons or make any, jumps. We really wanted to just offer this story out to the world and allow the audience to take whatever might be a comparison.
Yeah. And what's amazing is, and what we realized as we were going through is it's not just the Fourth Estate, First Amendment questions. We were, I think, 5-6 weeks into shooting when the New York Times came out with a big article on how, oh my goodness, how can this be? It turns out that only 5-6% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women, even now. And here we were thinking,
it's been 46 years. We've changed so much.
Exactly, yeah. and apparently we haven't. Mm-hmm. And literally, we all started circulating that article. We all read it, and we thought, wow, well, maybe this is also a good time to reflect on that. And it turns out, I think it is a good time to reflect on, how frankly we need more women in charge of these countries. Yeah, companies.
Yeah.
Wow, that was amazing.
That was amazing.
The film is very streamlined and focused. Was it difficult figuring out what to put in and what to leave out? Because, I mean, you cover a lot of ground in it, and there's a lot of interesting characters and lots of stuff to write about in here. Was it difficult figuring out what to leave out?
I think, we really, and this was something that was amazing from everyone that was involved. We wanted to tell this story sort of about a woman finding her voice. And so the film really is told through the perspective of this woman's journey. And so the decision then, in sort of the procedurally what happens, and the characters that are involved and the stories that are involved were kind of shaped by that and by that priority. It's also, for us, super lucky when the events that unfold, we could not make up or write better. So, she was really having her birthday party with Robert McNamara. She was really sitting with Abe Rosenthal when he finds out that there's a federal, that there's an injunction. These things, they did go public, and there was the threat of pulling it because a federal indictment is a catastrophic event. So I think for us, it was kind of a wealth of riches in the way that history played out. And so it was just kind of streamlining it to be, okay, what is the way to tell this story of Kay and the story of her and Ben's relationship, and then the story of the Post kind of stepping up?
Yeah, I think the history was pretty clear, and one of the things we did was go back over that history, and it turns out the more faithful you are to the history, the better the story. Not always the case, but very much so in this case. There were a couple things. There's a lawyer, a very famous lawyer at the time, Edward Bennett Williams, who Ben called, and that phone call was apparently something that helped him push so hard, that he was starting to waver, and a number of people mentioned this fella and that call, and it was one of those things where, you know what, in the miniseries version of that, sure, Edward Bennett Williams is a.
If we get 8 hours to do this,
yeah, exactly.
He's going to be a highlight.
Yeah. But but in the 2-hour movie, you know that so that's one of the few pieces that winds up not making it into the script, but not after some real thought. So there was some, what do we leave out here? But in terms of the primary thread of the story, it's there that, Sunday the Times published, Monday she's in New York because she's going to go public on Tuesday and happens to be at dinner with Abe Rosenthal when he gets the telex that Mitchell's coming after him. Tuesday they go public and the Times is enjoined. Wednesday she's at her small birthday party. I mean, literally the days lay out in such a profound way that week, it sort of gave us just a great roadmap.
It was a tough week. It was a busy week.
Yeah.
There was a lot there.
Talk about working with Steven Spielberg.
So it turns out he's made a few movies before.
Just a few, yeah.
It's very, I think surreal is kind of the initial word that that when you hear that this is happening in reality, you kind of have to get over at a certain point. But working with him is just inspiring. I mean, he is the person on set who's having the most fun. He's the person on set who is the most curious and the most excited to crawl into the fireplace to see what angle he can get from there, which is literally, we walked into a room and found him sitting in the fireplace looking around to find an angle. He's the one on the floor playing with a box, and we're sort of like, Steven, what are you doing with box? And it turns out into our Raiders shot of, the reveal of the papers and the faces there. He's also, I think for both of us, so incredibly on set, was incredibly collaborative. We got the opportunity to basically be standing behind him throughout the entirety of this production, and for him to turn around and say, what do you guys think? Which you kind of have to get over very quickly, being like, yeah, it's great, whatever you kind of know what you're doing. And really interested in opinions of everybody. And I don't know, it was really kind of the best film school that any of us could have ever gotten.
Yeah, I think, I think oftentimes in life and I guess in Hollywood, you wind up, meeting people, spending time with people who you've, worshiped from afar, or, known from afar, and think of them on some pedestal. And often, the direction they go in once you meet them is down.
They always say never meet your heroes.
Never meet your heroes.
Yeah.
And it is to me so rare that you meet a hero and they actually go up in your estimation. And that is Steven. Working with him, it's a complete joy, because that joy which he brings is so infectious. And as Liz said, it's shocking how collaborative he is, how much he involves you in the process. And maybe it was just because we were, doing this so quickly, and it was, okay, team huddle. How are we gonna make this work on the day? But also, just the magic of the day, that improvisational ability. Liz talked about this, we find him, sitting and playing with this box. And what you doing, Steven? And he's literally he's on the floor, right? This is a 70-year-old guy who's literally on the floor, hunched over, playing with a box. And the next thing you know, you have the camera coming out with the box lifting and revealing these faces of all these reporters looking into the box. It's the Raiders shot, right? Like, what's in the box? Well, it's the Pentagon Papers in the box. And it's this and it turns out it's a technically challenging shot. It's incredibly difficult in terms of how are you going to get the focus puller to make sure he gets the focus off the box and onto the faces. But he's got the team behind him that lets him have those flights of fancy, which turn into, beautiful camera work that helps accentuate the story, right? He takes what you give him in the script, right? And he uses the camera to tell whatever story you're trying to tell in that script, whatever story he's trying to tell at that moment. And it's going to graduate school in filmmaking.
Postdoctorate work.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary experience.
Real quick before we go, Josh, you just won an Oscar for Spotlight. Congratulations on that. Have you given Liz any advice about how to go through her first Oscar season?
Well,
We're not there yet, so take a couple steps back.
exactly.
I'm really excited for people to see the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where we're at right now.
I think that's right. I mean, I think, we're really hoping people see this movie and it starts a conversation. I think there are a lot of good things to talk about here with this movie. One of the things I loved about Spotlight is, it could be a long season. God willing, this would be one as well. And Spotlight, there were many things to talk about. I think with this movie, that's the same thing. And so I don't think I will tire of talking about this. I don't think either of us will tire about talking about this movie anytime soon. And hopefully
We'll talk about it for a while.
Hopefully we'll be asked to.
Yeah.
So, but it's again, I got to say, I think we both feel just lucky to be part of, Kay Graham's last dinner party, as it were. So
It's a good one. Yeah.
It's a great movie. Liz, Josh, thank you both so much, and congratulations.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
your
Thanks
time.
so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.